Gardener, let me start bluntly. If your potted plants keep wilting, dropping leaves, or refusing to grow, the problem is almost never what people tell you it is. It's not always the fertilizer, it's not always the watering schedule, and it's definitely not always the seed quality. The real culprit that most gardeners completely overlook is the invisible temperature your soil is actually sitting at. I know this because I watched my own potted garden start to die back, even while I was following every pro tip out there. The moment I measured the soil correctly and corrected the temperature, growth surged, roots thickened, and flowering came back in full force. Before I go further, hit that subscribe button if you want more practical, no-fluff advice that actually works for serious gardeners. You'll thank yourself when your plants thrive. Most gardeners completely ignore how cold or hot their pots actually get. The truth is, container soil behaves very differently from garden beds. A raised bed has thermal mass, clay, wood, soil volume, that helps buffer temperature swings. A potted plant, especially one in plastic or ceramic, heats up and cools down fast. If you're in direct sun, the top layer can spike to 120 degrees Fahrenheit by noon, and then drop to 55 degrees at night. That kind of swing stresses roots, slows nutrient uptake, and basically tells your plants, I can't grow here efficiently. Hydroponic systems aren't immune either. If the water temperature drifts even a few degrees outside the optimal range, roots suffer oxygen stress and nutrient absorption plummets. You need to actually measure soil temperature, not guess. Here's where most advice fails. Gardeners assume soil feels warm enough or it's sunny, so the soil is fine. Wrong. The only reliable method is a proper thermometer. I personally use the Riotemp heavy-duty compost thermometer, link in the description, which lets you check not just the surface, but deep in the potting medium. For potted plants, stick the probe 2 to 3 inches into the soil. For hydroponics, measure the water reservoir temperature and make adjustments if it's above 75 degrees Fahrenheit for warm season crops or below 65 degrees for temperate greens. How soil temperature affects nutrient uptake more than fertilizer. Even if your NPK is perfect, your plants won't absorb it if the soil temperature is off. Roots are living organisms. They respire, grow, and transport nutrients at an optimal temperature range. For most vegetables, that's 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's colder than that, enzymes slow down, microbial activity plummets, and nitrogen becomes locked in forms plants can't use. Too hot and you get root damage, increased evaporation, and even toxic accumulation of certain nutrients. Correcting soil temperature alone can make a mediocre soil mix perform like premium compost. The quickest way to fix cold soil in pots? Well, if your potted garden is suffering from cold soil, the fastest fix is thermal insulation. You can wrap your pots in a layer of bubble wrap, burlap, or straw. Personally, I prefer straw because it also lets the soil breathe, which is quite important. On small backyard pots, I usually layer 2 to 3 inches of straw around the outside of the container. For raised beds or larger planters, I'll cover the top with a 1 to 2 inch mulch layer of wood chips or shredded leaves. This traps heat at night and, reduces those daily swings. In hydroponics, I've actually added simple floating insulation covers over reservoirs to keep water at a consistent 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's dramatically improved root oxygenation and plant vigor. Preventing overheated soil in the summer is just as important. Conversely, hot soil kills potted plants just as fast. A black plastic pot can, believe it or not, reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit in direct sun. That's root roast territory, really. My go-to is reflective mulches, or sometimes just moving pots into partial shade during peak heat. Another trick I use is double potting. Place the plant in a smaller inner pot and then in a slightly larger outer pot, filling the gap with vermiculite or perlite. This buffers extreme heat while keeping the soil aerated. You can also paint pots white or use light-colored ceramic containers. Simple changes, but they drastically improve thermal regulation. Temperature gradients inside large pots are real, and you really need to know them. Even if the top of the soil seems fine, deeper roots might be struggling. This is where a thermometer is, honestly, critical. In my 10-gallon raised pots, the surface might read 78 degrees Fahrenheit, but 4 to 5 inches down it could be 63 degrees. Roots don't care about surface readings, they care about consistent warmth. I check the middle of the pot weekly with a 36-inch stem thermometer and adjust by adding insulation or sometimes adjusting light exposure. For hydroponic setups, I measure at multiple points in the reservoir. Hot spots and cold zones are surprisingly quite common. So, how do you actually calibrate your soil management based on temperature readings? Well, once you start taking those readings, you can really make smarter decisions. For example, in spring, I let pots warm up gradually by moving them from shade to morning sun before exposing them to full heat. In winter, I use thermal blankets or place pots near heat-retaining surfaces like stone walls. Knowing the actual temperature lets you avoid guesswork, reduce plant stress, and time your fertilizer or watering interventions correctly. Now let's talk about why a proper thermometer is honestly worth every penny. I've tested cheap thermometers, digital kitchen probes, and even DIY sticks with mercury, but nothing beats a heavy-duty compost thermometer like the RioTemp. The long stem lets you measure deep soil. It's waterproof, rugged, and gives you consistent readings every time. Since I started using it, I've saved dozens of plants from heat stress or cold shock, and my yields have increased noticeably. The link is in the description if you want one. It's really an investment in reliable gardening data rather than just guesswork. Soil temperature adjustments work at, honestly, all scales of gardening. Whether you're managing a few potted herbs on a balcony, multiple raised beds, or even hydroponic lettuce towers, the principle is the same. Measure the soil or water temperature, understand the ideal range for your crops, and make adjustments. I've applied this technique to tomato pots, chili peppers, leafy greens, and even dwarf fruit trees, and the results are, well, always consistent. Your roots need predictable conditions, and just a few small adjustments can make the difference between struggling plants and robust harvests. Here's a practical weekly routine for soil temperature management. For serious gardeners, I check soil temperature once or twice a week, adjusting mulch, shade, or watering as needed. In potted gardens, I'll also rotate pots to even out temperature exposure. Hydroponic systems get a quick water temp check, and any deviations over 3 degrees Fahrenheit from the optimal range are corrected immediately. This level of monitoring might sound a bit tedious, but it's honestly why experienced growers see results that beginners miss, even when using the same seeds or soil. Just a few final thoughts on these invisible soil temperature problems. So many gardeners end up blaming themselves when their potted plants fail. They change fertilizers, watering schedules, or even buy new seeds when the real issue is invisible, the wrong soil temperature. Correcting it is straightforward, repeatable, and improves every aspect of plant health, from nutrient uptake to root growth. Use the tips I've shared. Measure consistently, insulate pots when it's cold, shield them from heat when necessary, and integrate a quality thermometer like the RioTemp to guide your decisions. Remember, gardening is a combination of observation and intervention. The plants won't tell you their soil is too hot or cold, but with the right tools and habits, you can stay one step ahead. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to Farm Logic so you don't miss more of these practical, results-driven tips that serious gardeners swear by. Share this video with anyone struggling with potted plants or raised beds. They'll thank you when their garden finally thrives. And of course, check the description for links to the thermometer and other recommended tools that make soil management simple and reliable.